going on, everybody? We are back. We got the Club and Sub podcast, episode number 135. This week, we're talking UFC Vegas 73. As usual, you got me, John. You can find me on Twitter, MMA Fox, Lags, at Danny_Lags. Guys, please drop a like and subscribe for the culture, for the algorithm, for us. We'd really appreciate it.
For the boys.
Yeah, for the boys. It's a decent card this week. I mean, it's I shouldn't say that. It's really like we're really like dumpster diving in the UFC these days. I got to be honest. Like it's. I mean, I can't even remember. I mean, what was the last fight night that you can recall that was like an actual like good fight night card on paper? It's been a while. Like I don't know if we've had one all year, honestly.
I'm just looking back now. The Pavlovich Blades one wasn't like horrible. Like name wise, it's pretty decent. Kind of. I mean, I'm not saying like this from name value wise, this card's not horrible, but like yeah, altogether the fights in general, the main event, we'll talk about it. It's not great.
No, it's not, and it doesn't get much better the next card either. So
Holloway Allen.
Holloway Allen was a decent card. Yeah, that's true. Before we jump into this card,
that was also live though at Fans. So
yeah. Before we jump into this card, though, we can talk about last week. Was a dumpster fire for me, to be honest. I did a stream, gave out some Bellator picks, did pretty well on Bellator, was up like 2.4 units, was pretty pumped going into Saturday. Felt really, really good about the direction the weekend was taking. Felt good about my bets. Sadly, not a single one of them hit. I had 1.2 units on Jessica Rose Clark. Lisboa showed she's on this level. I don't mind taking the stab. Obviously, the bet was bad in retrospect. Had Ji-Young Kim minus 190. Probably was a good bet. But obviously, that fight was an absolute unmitigated disaster in terms of what the outcome was. Yeah, I mean, and she has no one to blame but herself. Like it really, the crazy thing is to lose that fight, she had to lose 2 points and still probably should have gotten that decision,
or like draw at worst.
Like I saw someone tweeting like that's why you can't lay WMMA juice, and it's like motherfucker, are you kidding me?
Like, 2 points. That was the sketchiest ass fight I've ever watched in recent like weeks. So it's like that's why you don't want to lay juice.
Regrets. Man, right. Yeah. I bet Tim Means for a unit, and I thought that was a decent bet. I mean, he won the first round. He looked good early, and then he just got caught in a sub. Had 2 units, Daniel Rodriguez. That was not great. Gary looked pretty good. Obviously the finish came pretty quickly, but he looked a lot faster, and you could see Rod was struggling to hit him. So pretty bad bet there. And then I had 3 units, Anthony Smith. And honestly, like, obviously results-wise, it was bad. I kind of assumed Smith was going to do what he normally does, bite the mouthpiece, go forward, get in his face. Instead, he just sat on the outside at a range where he couldn't land on Walker, and Walker could easily chop his leg. Walker bets were good. Walker fought pretty well. I did not see, if you told me someone in that fight landed 98 strikes, I would have almost guaranteed it was Smith. Instead, it was Walker. So, yeah, I mean, it was a really bad bet, really bad card for me. I think it's my worst of the year. It was like minus 9.1 units. But I'm hoping we'll get it back this week. What did you have, Lags?
We will get it back this week, John. But, yeah, so I made just about a unit, literally like 0.99 units. So again, we'll talk about 2 similar bets. I had D-Rod for a unit plus 250. I had, or 245. I had Anthony Smith for a unit as well at minus 110. Again, thought he could have been more aggressive. I think I kind of gave him the Thiago Santos fight, really, that Walker had over 5 rounds, just kind of let him kick him for free. So D Silva at plus 130, which I know you grabbed live at big plus numbers.
I did.
Which I thought the only thing that I had an issue with that fight was obviously the ref not giving him some position back. That was really.
So I agree, but it seemed like I bet him plus 460 in round 3, and I was like, he's clearly up 2-0. Yeah. And people were like, that's a sketchy decision. I was like, was it? Like, I was pretty sure he was.
I thought it was going to be close.
Yeah. I mean, round 1 was close, but I didn't think round 2 was close at all.
And then honestly, I had 2 units on this. Pretty just safe chalk parlay was the doesn't start round 3 with Olberg, and the doesn't start round 3 with Rhodes struck Almeida. So both of those cash pretty easily.
Yeah, so I mean, small win for you, but a win's a win. I mean,
Yep.
you beat me by just about 11 units last week, so
So it's okay, John. It's all right. We'll get it back.
So we
This week.
move into this week, though. Yeah, as I said, dog shit card, whatever. It's MMA. They're every week. We bet on them. First fight of the night: Takashi Sato, Temba Gorimbo. I'm like I'm not gonna do it. I was and I thought about betting Sato just because I do feel as if Gorimbo is quite poor and not really UFC level. The guy's got no defense standing. Obviously, the obvious path here is grappling for Gorimbo, and there is some upside there. Sato hasn't looked great there, but I also think some context is in order on the Sato side. Like, him getting backpacked by Gunnar Nelson for 3 rounds, I don't really care about in the context of this fight. Him getting taken down twice and subbed by Bilal Muhammad, okay. I mean, that was impressive, but like, Muhammad went 2 for 9 on takedowns, and Muhammad's a much better wrestler than Gorimbo. It's not like he was just pushing him over and getting on top of him easily. So I don't think Gorimbo takedowns are a certainty by any means. And I also think Gorimbo's jiu-jitsu is sloppy enough that he could easily just end up falling off and giving up dominant position to Sato. And on the feet, yeah, I mean, Gorimbo should be busier, but I'm pretty sure Sato's going to counter him pretty hard here. But with that said, yeah, I mean, look, Sato's looked really bad on the ground, and he has a huge work rate issue. The guy is just not a doer of things, and Gorimbo is. So, if he was a dog, like plus 125, I'd probably take a small poke of it, but I don't really have a lot of interest in minus 110. What do you think?
Yeah, I echo kind of similar sentiments. Just because for me, it's just the low volume nature, kind of what you ended on there. He's got big power for sure, but like, yeah, I mean, that's kind of what he's relying on. So yeah, I do think Gorimbo is hittable enough that if it does stay standing, Sato's probably finding a knockout. And yeah, I mean, that's it for me as well. So yeah.
Moving on, second fight of the night. We got a dumpster fire here. We got Victoria Leonardo taking on Natalia Silva. Natalia Silva is about minus 1,000 right now. Any thoughts here? Are you interested in dog Leonardo?
Oh, I'm not interested in dog Leonardo. No. I'm interested in this fight. I'm not interested in dog Leonardo. I am interested in under 2.5 though, at minus 140. I know for the most part that is Silva inside the distance, which is actually minus 150. But yeah, I think Silva pieces are up on the feet. I don't think there's much grappling equity for Leonardo. She's been finishing almost all of her losses. I think it's a great spot for Silva. Again, I mean, we'll talk about it, but why is this fight being made? No real idea.
I completely agree. In my mind, I guess the only thing I can think of is, maybe they're just trying to bring Silva along slowly, and that would be a nice change of pace from what the UFC's been doing with throwing some of these young kids just into the fire way too soon. But I had someone message me this week, and they were like, "What do you think? Like, at what point do you take a shot at Victoria Leonardo?" And I was like, at no point am I taking a shot at Victoria Leonardo. Like, I legitimately, and I'm not kidding, and if my asshole wasn't so raw from last week, considered hitting Silva at minus 550 here. I look at this fight and I'm like, what is, like, lads, make it for me. What's the case for Victoria Leonardo winning this fight?
Cage pushing.
And an injury, probably. Like an injury, cage push, a cut, something like that. Or a DQ. Like it's very hard. Silva fought Jasmine Jasudavicius in her first fight. She fought Teresa Bleda in her second fight. Both of those women are bigger than Leonardo. They're both stronger than her. They're both better grapplers. Bleda had some success on top, but gassed out doing it. Jasmine had almost no success grappling in that fight. And I feel like in the context of this fight, it's like, Silva was able to mostly keep those fights in her preferred range. I struggle to see how Victoria Leonardo gets it to her, preferred area. And even if she does, I think Bleda is better on top than Leonardo is anyway. I think Silva's going to butcher her. I am not about that WMMA chalk life, but I really think she should. And I actually think that under is pretty good. I might bet it. Leonardo's been finished in 4 of her 5 losses. It is something that she gets herself finished. And
similar to Bleda, she has horrible cardio herself. So it's like, yeah.
Exactly. And Silva does a lot of like nasty attritional stuff. So I'm with you. This is Silva all day to me. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I will not lose sleep over passing on Victoria Leonardo. It is not even something that is on like the fringe of my brain in this spot. So moving on though, we got the fight of the night. The MMA Twitter battlefield here. We got Chase Hooper taking on Nick Fiore. I have to have some water for this one before I go in here. But I bet Chase Hooper pretty big here. And maybe I'll de-risk some of that. At the moment, I've got 5 units on him. Like I said, I might de-risk some of it. I got to think about it, see what the line does. But I think people need to think about this fight more from like a market perspective and what the market's telling you. You know, the general common thought here about Nick Fiore and him being the side, or he should be favorite, et cetera, is Chase Hooper has really bad striking. Chase Hooper is a grappler with bad wrestling. How does Chase Hooper win this fight? And it's like, if that is your basis for this, capping this fight for Fiore, well, what's your edge on the market, right? Because everybody knows that. We've all known that since Chase Hooper's first fight in the UFC, right? There is no edge on the market taking that approach with a Chase Hooper fight. And I haven't really heard much beyond that. I've heard, Fiore's a black belt. He's not that likely to get, dominated by Hooper grappling. And Hooper's coming up in weight. To me, of all those arguments, the one that holds the most water to me is Hooper coming up in weight. That could be a concern. But at the same time, Hooper's was a 6'1" featherweight who's 23 years old and obviously filling out and looks like he's doing strength and conditioning for the first time. In terms of the fight itself, here's my thing. So the consensus is Fiore is a much better striker and Chase is bad at wrestling. It's like, let's just operate under the assumption Fiore is a better striker. I have no problem doing that. Chase is probably the worst striker in the UFC. So we'll operate under that assumption. Do we think the margins are that wide though? I feel as if everybody's like, well, Fiore survived Mateusz Rebecki, therefore, Hooper would die versus Rebecki, therefore he kills Hooper. But it's like, go back and actually watch that fight. Mateusz Rebecki, he's a very good wrestler. He's an intriguing prospect. He is an absolutely abysmal striker. He's powerful and he's got a lot of horsepower. He throws hard, but he's got no defense. He basically was just walking forward, spamming wild overhands. And what did the distance stats say from that fight? He owned him there. He out-attempted him by 50 strikes. He outlanded him by 40 strikes. Fiore wanted no part of that. Yeah, he landed a hard shot or two across that fight, but he mostly got dominated on the feet. So he just fought a pretty bad striker who is a grappler and was comfortable enough to just literally spam overhands at him for the first 6 minutes. And then on the back end of that fight, people keep citing, the Nick Fiore Renzo black belt. Well, I mean, is he a Renzo black belt? Yes, he has it from an affiliate school. He didn't get it under Renzo Gracie. This isn't like Matt Serra, who literally trained under Renzo Gracie and got a black belt from him. He got it from an affiliate school in New Hampshire. And if you go back to Fiore's regional tape, this guy basically every time he got taken down, or in his amateur tape, would basically just end up sitting in guard, not doing a whole lot. What happened in the Rebecki fight? Rebecki got gassed out 6 minutes into the fight, dead gassed, literally took him down, no effort at all from Fiore to get up. Round 3 starts, takes him down, no effort from Fiore to get up, just kind of letting a gassed out fighter lay there. And it's like, so you're telling me this guy is this high-level jiu-jitsu practitioner who couldn't even work below a gassed opponent? Like that, that doesn't make sense, but it does track with the amateur tape of Fiore. And so I look at it and it's like, so what is the angle here? Because we know Fiore is not a great striker to begin with. He's going to want to grapple. And so it's like, is he a better grappler than Chase Hooper? I'm pretty sure the answer is no. My opinion is they're both noodles. Like that, no question about it. Neither guy has good takedown defense. You can cite the Rebecki fight all you want. Look at how easy he got him down. That guy's hips caved in like a sinkhole was opening up in the octagon. All right. Neither of these guys has good takedown defense, but I'm fine operating under the assumption Fiore is the better wrestler. Fiore gives a lot of space on the ground and Hooper is very good at scrambling. The bottom line here is Hooper is quite good on bottom and reversing position to the top, whereas Fiore is only quote unquote good from top position here. Yeah. On top of which we have Fiore, the cardio dynamic, which in my opinion massively favors Hooper in this fight. Fiore's only been out of round 1 once and he's dead gassed against Rebecki. Now, it is true it was a short notice fight, so give him some credit there. But at the same time, that's all we have to go on. If him exiting round 1 is that fight. So I feel like for the Fiore side, you have to think his best path is just out grappling Chase, which I guess could happen. But I think Chase is a much better scrambler. And in terms of top game, Chase's is a lot more vicious than Fiore's is. He's fought much better competition. Like, you can say whatever you want about Chase's UFC competition. He's 3-3 in the UFC. The worst guy that Chase beat in the UFC, Peter Barrett, is literally better than every single fighter Nick Fiore has beaten in his entire career. So it's like I look at this line and I'm like, what are people expecting? Nick Fiore to turn to Alex Caceres? Is he going to jab and step off the center line for 15 minutes? Like, is that what's going to happen here? No, they're going to probably grapple. And if they grapple, unless Fiore can just size bully him, I think he's going to get pretty comprehensively out-grappled in this fight. Again, it's possible he's too big and he just gets on top in half guard and can ride him out. But that hasn't really been how Fiore grapples. It's a very aggressive style of grappling. And on bottom, he's much worse than Hooper is. And Hooper's pretty nasty on top. So it's like I'm getting a 23-year-old who, yes, has major striking issues, but who's a pretty good grappler and is 500 in the UFC, who's fought way better competition against a 25-year-old who's shown no real ability to grapple off his back, no real striking chops whatsoever, and has fought nothing but bums until his last fight. And the best case here is, oh, that 23-year-old's bad at striking, and the 25-year-old survived Mateusz Rebecki. Like, that is the case for Nick Fiore here being a favorite. Like, that is fucking insane. It is very hard to go 500 in the UFC. You know, we were chatting with Ozzy in a group chat, and I thought said it best. Fiore's a can crusher and not a particularly good one. I was reading a scouting preview by Sean Bitter about Fiore when he entered the UFC, and I quote, "I really have no idea what the UFC is doing signing Nick Fiore to a contract here." Like, this is not someone who came on board that they were like, oh, yeah, you know, this is a hot prospect. This was, okay, Rebecki's opponent's out. We need someone from the dumpster. We'll just call this guy up off the regionals. And everybody's clearly viewing it that way. Hooper got a new 4-fight contract last week. Like, you think they're like, of all the guys that could have given Hooper, if they were trying to take care of him, it wouldn't have been Nick Fiore. It would have been someone else. You know, I just don't see it. I don't think Nick Fiore is a very high-level prospect. I don't think he's a very good striker. I think he's a pretty mid grappler, and I think he's at a huge cardio disadvantage. The best thing on his side is size. And to be clear, with all of this being said, Hooper could definitely lose this fight. Like, Chase Hooper is not very good at MMA. He's got a number of holes. All I'm saying is, based on the available data from both guys, I feel like you have to make Hooper like 60-65% here. Him being an underdog to me makes literally zero sense. Am I crazy? Like, what do you think, Lags?
No, I'm on Hooper as well. Unit plus 115. I mean, you hit a lot of the main points. I guess I'll cover them kind of briefly. The cardio edge for me is big here in the grappling. I think that, like you said, if Hooper is on top, he's more likely to dominate and gas out Fiore. Whereas Fiore, again, just more so if he's on top. Whereas, again, like you said, not a great scrambler. I think a lot of people also just kind of see like Hooper getting knocked out from Garcia and like, oh, Steve sucks. Oh, like, oh, he got knocked out. Oh, Chase didn't try to grapple. Oh, but it's like Chase was also minus 250 there. Where we just want to talk
minus
about like
350.
Talk about from a market perspective. Like, Steve would probably be minus 200 at least over Fiore. So, I mean, yeah, I think this is a Chase spot for sure. It's a small play for me, but yeah, I understand the sentiments why you're going big.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, it's just like I look at the macro, and on top of all the tape stuff and the actual like technical breakdown of the fight, like for me, you look at the macro and it's like, yeah, Chase Hooper's 2 years younger and he's got his holes, but the guy's got literally more than 2x the fights. The level of competition, I love you too, Evan, even if you are on Nick. And the level of competition gap is so gigantic. It's just like you don't really get opportunities like this very often where you have a guy who's 500 in the UFC taking on a no-name guy from New Hampshire who's fought nothing but bums. Yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens. If it turns out and Evan's right that, you know, Chase's cardio won't hold up here, then yeah, we'll be in trouble. But I honestly think there's a pretty good cardio case to be made for Hooper here. I like him quite a bit.
Yeah, I feel like you just have to make a lot of assumptions on the striking for Fiore, as well as like the top time grappling. Like, I mean, Chase is an easy guy to hold down and grapple. I mean, obviously, like Steven Peterson did it, but Steven Peterson actually is a solid UFC vet and decent grappler himself.
Yeah, I mean, Peterson's like a 10-fight vet.
Yeah.
But anyway, moving on. We got Rodrigo Nascimento taking on Ilir Latifi. What are your thoughts here?
It's a gross fight. I thought Ilir retired. Honestly, I know that's the big talking point this week. I mean, the guy's coming almost like 6 months off of the recent fight, but I thought he retired after the last one. He was talking about medical issues. I think it's a decent fight for Rodrigo. Honestly, I know it's going to be a tough time taking Latifi down, but I think on the feet, I think he can just outwork him personally. Like, I mean, Latifi throws like 5-10 strikes around, doesn't have much grappling upside himself. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think a Latifi bet, in my opinion, is just like top timing for 15, probably.
Yeah, so I'm gonna eventually bet Latifi here.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
Make the case,
I
John.
guess
Let's hear it.
it's funny. I bet Nascimento big in his last fight against Tanner Boser. But that was like, I felt like that was a easy fight on paper for Nascimento. Like he was getting an undersized heavyweight who can't defend takedowns and or get off his back against like a pretty big black belt. Now he comes into this fight, and I like aspects of Nascimento's game. Don't get me wrong. I like the work rate. I like that he proactively grapples at heavyweight. The thing is, I feel like this is a fight that's really bad for him in a lot of respects. Like, yes, Latifi's 40 years old. He could melt here and just get KO'd by Nascimento, possibly just go over a cliff. Certainly true. But I don't really see any way that Nascimento gets his grappling going in this fight. Latifi's the much better wrestler, in my opinion. He's the better defensive wrestler, in my opinion. Although there's not a lot of data on Nascimento's takedown defense, but I feel like that's a fairly safe assumption. You know, Corey Anderson couldn't take down Ilir Latifi. I'd be pretty surprised if Nascimento does. And so in the stand-ups, yes, I favor Nascimento's volume against Latifi, but Nascimento in his last two fights, fun fact for you, 85 of the 160 significant head strikes attempted against him landed. Like the guy just has no defense whatsoever. He comes into the pocket completely naked all the time. He's very hittable and he's very hurtable. He got knocked out cold by Dawkins, and he's been hurt badly by Alan Baudot and Tanner Boser in the other two fights since. And while Latifi, not known for being a striker, he's much faster. He's got much faster hands than Nascimento has. And I think he's got more power. So I wouldn't really be shocked to see Latifi hurt him bad in this fight or finish him. And then on the other side of it, it's like we know Latifi's going to grapple. And as I mentioned, I know Latifi's the much better wrestler here. Very confident if this plays out, he'll get takedowns. Nascimento's bottom game is a bit of a question mark, but if he does what a lot of these jiu-jitsu guys do, it's very possible he's just going to sit there and Latifi's going to top time him for 10 to 12 minutes. I feel as if that's not being like talked about enough, that the better wrestler against the jiu-jitsu guy, and Latifi is very positionally aware in top position. I think the chances of him getting guard sub by a guy like Nascimento aren't very good. Typically what you'd worry about with Latifi is his gas tank, right? But Nascimento doesn't have a very good gas tank either. And so I look at the fight, I'm like, yeah, he's 40. He could go over a cliff. Nascimento could definitely outpace him on the feet. But Nascimento can get rocked and hurt here. Like, no question about it. Latifi will probably land heavy a few times if they swing in the pocket. And I think he's the better wrestler. Like, we've seen it a bunch of times in Latifi's career where he's gone in there and just big brothered guys who are worse wrestlers than him. Even at heavyweight, you know, he probably got robbed against Derek Lewis, who is bigger than Nascimento is. You know, we saw him do this game to Tanner Boser. We saw him do it to Alexei Olenek. Like, unless he completely goes over the cliff, I think he's going to get takedowns here, and I think he's probably going to get top time.
To be fair, to counterpoint that at the end there, Boser, bad defensive grappler.
Yeah.
Olenek, old as dirt.
Yeah. And Derek Lewis.
Right. Which, yeah.
I don't.
I guess the only thing I'm asking you is I guess you think takedowns come pretty easy for Latifi. I guess I'm pushed back.
I would say they may come pretty easy. I wouldn't say it's a lock.
Right.
But I feel like there is a reasonable chance that they come easy. Okay. Because he is a very good wrestler, and Nascimento hasn't been in there with as good wrestlers as him. I don't favor Latifi outright. I'm just saying, to me, It seems like a very close fight that, you know, there's a lot of like moving parts to this fight, but I think Latifi can kind of dictate where the fight takes place, which is a huge advantage and not something you often see at plus 170. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Moving on, Lags, I'll throw it to you again. We got Orion Cosce. He's taking on Gilbert Urbina. Any thoughts here? This seems like a pretty popular take this week is Gilbert Urbina on MMA Twitter.
It is, and I would say I find myself on the other side of that take, but not really passionately, just because Cosce's, you know, gas tank's not great. His striking in general, not that great. But he hits hard. He can wrestle. And Urbina's defensively void on the feet and not the best defensive wrestler. So, I mean, I think there are paths for Cosce, but again, I wouldn't love it. So
yeah, I'm with you actually, and I actually did tape it while Urbina was still a dog, and I just wasn't very interested in it. Current line is, I think it's -110 aside right now, if I'm not mistaken.
I saw -120,
-118 Cosce now. It looks like there was a bit of buyback.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think I do see what the market sees in Urbina. He's fat, he's bigger. He's probably the more technical striker. Obviously he's the more dangerous submission grappler. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of holes. Like you said, Urbina is very, very hittable. I know Cosce throws looping shots, but Urbina is there to get cracked all day long. I don't think this guy's the most durable guy in the world by any means. He was getting wobbled all over the place regionally. Obviously got KO'd by Tresean Gore. In the grappling,
coming down in weight too.
Yeah, he's coming down in weight. And in the grappling, like I could see him back taking Cosce and subbing him, but I think Cosce's a much better wrestler. And I think he's getting way too much shit for the Blood Diamond fight. Like it was very clear from the Jeremiah Wells fight to the Cosce fight that Diamond had trained his defensive wrestling quite a bit in that fight. And he still got out-grappled pretty badly in the fight. It's funny because like Cosce gets shit for it, but it's like the guy got 10 minutes of top time. Like, are we really giving him shit for that performance? Is Blood Diamond a worse striker than Gilbert Urbina? I'm not sure that's the case. I don't think so. Probably not, right? And his other fight in the UFC was against Phil Rowe, where he won the first round. And then his other fight, Matt Dixon was a college wrestler who's a pretty good grappler who he was basically able to gas out just anti-grappling him and then eventually dominated himself. And so I look at the fight, and yes, Urbina's the better striker. Both guys are hittable. Both guys are a bit gassy. But to me, I think Urbina's got really bad hips and is really easy to take down. And Cosce, in my opinion, is a much better wrestler. And I think Cosce fights through his fatigue okay, whereas we saw Urbina tap to one hook in against Brian Battle in his last fight, or 2 fights ago. And so I kind of feel like Cosce's game is a bit more reliable down the stretch here. So I do favor him outright. I think -125, -130 is probably fair just because you're giving me 2 guys with no defense who aren't very good. Yeah, one guy's better at striking, but one guy's a much better wrestler. I have to side with the wrestler in that fight, But yeah, I haven't bet it either. I'm not passionate.
Yeah, and I will give some flack a little bit on the Urbina side with the Battle fight because it was on short notice. So
yeah,
but it's still it was a little bad vibes on the finish.
Yeah, I agree completely. Moving on, Karolina Kowalkiewicz taking on, or Kowalkiewicz, I don't even know how you say it, taking on Vanessa Demopolis. KK, yeah. KK's -130, Vanessa Demopolis +110. I initially thought I would bet KK in this fight. I was pretty sure I would, just because I felt like it was time to fade Demopolis. I bet her in her last fight. She's been decent value in her last couple, but I did think the market might be getting too high on her. KK's obviously a vet who's been around forever, fought everybody in the sport. But man, after looking at it, I'm not betting Demopolis, but I think KK has her way on the feet here pretty easily. Obviously, Demopolis has some power, but the difference in technique is comical. Like KK should really dominate all of those spots. But I really don't trust what happens if it goes to the ground. I did a really deep dive on like KK's ground game because I wanted to bet KK, like very much so. I wanted to have a bet on her, and I'm like, if she can get off the ground, I'll definitely bet her here. Her defensive grappling is garbage on bottom, and she plays guard, and she doesn't even have particularly good jiu-jitsu. She's fairly easy to pass. She makes a lot of positional mistakes. And so with that dynamic, can Vanessa take her down? I'm not really sure. KK has good takedown defense, and Vanessa's not the best wrestler, but I do think it's improving, and it doesn't take a lot for fights to get to the ground in MMA, Often it's not even off a takedown.
WMMA.
Scramble, or WMMA especially. Yeah. Yep. It's just a trip or whatever. And I really don't trust KK being on the ground with Vanessa whatsoever. I do not. So ultimately where I come down is KK is probably the side, but the finishing ability of Demopolis combined with her just being much better on the ground makes me want nothing to do with it. What do you think?
Yeah, kind of similarly as well, but I will say that like I'm more passionate on the Karolina side just because I think that Vanessa's wrestling isn't that good, and I mean that's kind of like not that I was super passionate about it in the last bit, but like Maria Oliveira is like one of the worst to do it ever, and I thought like she could easily
Yes.
she could easily get her wrestling going if the striking was going south, which it was. So yeah, I lean KK here again. I think she has her way on the feet, but again, similarly to you, if this does hit the mat, I don't know if she gets up. Could be the round.
Yeah, or the fight.
Right.
So,
Yep.
agreed. Moving on, we got Viacheslav Borshchev taking on Maheshate. Both of these men coming off losses. What do you think, Legs?
You know, we were chatting about this right before the pod. It's kind of just a weird fight where I just feel like it's probably going to stay standing for 15. You got two fairly durable guys, and the over 1.5 is minus 135. That's kind of where I've been looking. Haven't made a bet on the fight yet, but yeah, I just think Borshchev's slightly crisper technical on the feet. Both guys are hittable, so that kind of was giving me pause in the over. But yeah, I think it's fairly low, tepid striking fight.
Yeah, I bet Borshchev at like minus 130. As I mentioned to you, I've honestly considered buying out of it. It's not the most confident take I've ever had in my life. I do think he's the better striker. And I think to a degree, the market has overrated Maheshate off of basically a one-shot knockout against Steven Peterson, or not Steven Peterson, and Steve Garcia in his first UFC fight. And I don't think Maheshate is very good at all. I do think that Borshchev is the much better striker here. You know, the stats bear that out and significantly. Maheshate is obviously very young and very green, whereas Borshchev's 31. He really should be in his prime. And so I think Borshchev should outstrike him in this fight. You know, looking at Maheshate's career, I mean, you go look at his contenders fight. He won it against Estremadura, but that's because Estremadura emptied the gas tank in the first round trying to get him out of there, gassed out, and then he won 2 pretty close rounds after that. But at the same time, man, Borshchev's really, really hittable, and Maheshate does hit very, very hard. And I do wonder if maybe I'm trying to get too cute here, because do you really want it? Like, Borshchev's not going to grapple Maheshate. We know this. Right. I don't, to be clear, I've heard some takes that Maheshate could grapple him. I don't really think so. I think Maheshate would gas himself out if he tried to grapple Borshchev. He could take him down, but he's not going to hold him down. But Borshchev's open enough in the pocket, and Maheshate's big enough and hits hard enough that him getting knocked out at a pretty high clip seems pretty reasonable. And so I do favor Borshchev semi-significantly on minutes, but I do think Maheshate's got more KO upside. I think he has more wobble upside or just critical hit upside like throughout this fight. And so with that dynamic, I'm not sure if I want to hold on to my Borshchev money here. I felt like it was a good time to buy low on Borshchev off of 2 really ugly performances against guys that wrestled him. But yeah, I mean, I'm a bit nervous about it, to be quite frank. So yeah, we'll see. I might hold it. I might get rid of it. I don't know. Moving on, we got Michael Johnson taking on Carlos Diego Ferreira. Lags, any hot takes here?
Well, this is a fight. Like, this is what I'm talking about, like name value, though. Like, as you know, the card's not great, but you get fights like this. You know, I was talking in our chat earlier. This reminds me a lot of the KK Ducote fight, where it's like, I think on the feet, Johnson probably not owns Ferreira, but I think he's a much better striker on the feet. But if it hits the mat, like, could be the fight. Definitely could, probably the round. But it's like Ferreira hasn't been an aggro grappler lately. He's been off for quite some time. He's 38. So, like, but at the end of the other side, it's like, you got Michael Johnson. Do you really want to trust him as well to not get grappled? So, yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah. Initially, when I saw the line, my thinking was, how can this be possible? You know, but Carlos Diego Ferreira at minus 150 against Michael Johnson. But then the more I thought about it, Ferreira's 38 and hasn't fought in a year and a half, as you mentioned. The last time we saw him, and I was big on him in that fight against Gamrot, I still am not entirely sure what happened.
Yeah,
he got kneed in the back and was just like, okay, I'm out. Like, did he have a severe injury? Like, do we know?
I don't know. He's had injuries lately. I mean, recently, but not that I'm.
Yeah, so to
Completely aware
me,
of.
that's a
Yeah.
pretty bad look. And I thought his cardio against Benny looked a bit sus in the fight before. Granted, that fight was at a hellacious pace. But after CDF came back off of his steroid suspension, one of the things that drove that entire run was him pressuring guys and just putting on hellacious paces on them. If he doesn't have that, he's not the best technical striker. He's very good at volume spam, but against a guy like Michael Johnson, I feel like Johnson on the feet is going to pick him off early and often in this fight. You know, Benny's the last southpaw we saw a CDF fight, and he had a lot of issues with him. Obviously, he fought Dustin Poirier, who knocked him out. I think it was Dustin Poirier, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Yeah, who
Not
knocked
CDF
him out
out,
as well. Yeah. So I'm not sure I really trust him standing against the southpaw either. But to your point, Michael Johnson, how many fights have we seen this guy look like he's on cruise control early and just dominate fights only to have one entanglement lead to the fight ending? It's just something that happens at such a high clip. I don't really ever want to try, especially not against someone like CDF. But with that said, I do sort of feel like Johnson can keep this standing. You know, he's got very good hips, and CDF's not. He's not going to chain wrestle him. You know, he's not going to shoot a double, move to a single. It's going to be single shots, and that's really the kind of stuff Johnson should defend. But at the same time, and even from a market perspective, Johnson just went from plus 350 against Mark Jacasey and plus 200 against Jamie Malarkey to plus 140 in this fight. It's kind of weird. I don't really want to stand in front of that. I kind of like Evans' take in the chat a bit. I like the under here. Minus 160 is not bad. I haven't hit it, but I may. I actually think both guys potentially could have bonk equity on the feet. And obviously, Michael Johnson probably gives a limb away at some point in this fight. So, yeah, I think it's a fun fight, though. It's probably the most interesting fight on the card, right?
Maybe the next one we're about to talk about. Or you can maybe say the co-main. I don't know. There's a lot of good ones.
Well, we'll talk about the next one then. Andre Fialho is taking on Joaquin Buckley. I'm going to bet Fialho probably right after we get off this. I was hoping to get better than plus 200, but it seems like Fialho is getting hit now. I initially, when I saw this fight came out, was pretty sure I'd bet Buckley here because I faded Fialho with Baeza. I faded him with Matthews. I faded him with Salikov. The thing is, Miguel Baeza, Salikov and Matthews certainly, but probably even Miguel Baeza are better pocket strikers than Joaquin Buckley is, in my opinion. I kind of like Buckley because I feel he's always got a high floor. You know, he hits very, very hard. He does a good job getting in and out of the pocket, like not being in too many extended exchanges, and he's got good takedown defense. But he's very, very predictable in his movements. He's very easy to read coming into the pocket. You know, when we've seen him try to grapple, he has gassed out badly, and now he's cutting to 170. So I don't really think he's going to do that. And then, man, you know, it's funny because when you look back at Buckley's run, it's really a lot worse when you look at it like all in one spot than when you think about individual fights. The man's been knocked out in the UFC 3 times. He could have lost the decision to Abdulrazak Al-Hassan, very close. He was very close to going to a very greasy decision with Antonio Arroyo. I don't know. Buckley, he's, like I said, high floor, but the guy is crackable and finishable, and he's not the best minute winner ever. And on the Fialho side, look, I hate Andre Fialho as a fighter. I do not really think he's quite UFC level, but I think you have to respect what he brings to the table. You know, he pressures, he's a good boxer, he hits very hard, he has very, very fast hands. The guy took a round off of Michel Pereira. I mean, give him his props, right? And he took a round off Salikov as well. The thing is, he has no defense, which is a huge issue and could be an issue here as well, which is why I don't even think he's not durable. He just gets hit a lot and has gotten knocked out a bunch. But you look at this fight and zoom out. Is Buckley going to come out and out-grapple Fialho hard? I don't really think so. And if they swing on the feet, well, both of these guys are potent strikers and both of them can be finished. Both of them have shown that they can slow down at a high pace. I don't really see how that equates to this being minus 220 Buckley. Like where is he minus 220? Is Buckley's finishing upside here considerably higher than Fialho's? I really don't think so. I almost feel like Fialho's KO equity by itself might cover the price. I mean, what do you think, Lags?
Yeah, no, I'm literally to echo what you just said about the yeah, John, great point on that. Like I was gonna say, Buckley's not a guy you want to lay like minus 200, minus 240 because he's. I mean, how does he cover it really?
What are
And
his
then to talk
tools
about
that are minus 200?
right. He doesn't have like a wrestling path because he doesn't have the cardio to do it. And on the feet, he's hittable, fragile enough, doesn't have a great volume. So it's like, and then we want to talk about like from a price perspective. So his inside the distance, I think, was plus 100. So yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy to me.
So I like Fialho here. I played his money line 1 unit plus 185, and I have a small shot on his knockout round 1 plus 700 too.
yeah, I feel as if it's one of these classic fights that the market gets wrong a lot, where you have two guys who are mostly going to strike, neither of them defense, and both hit hard, but one guy is more popular than the other. But in reality, there's no way if these guys bite mouthpieces, Buckley's minus 220, right? I don't even see how that's possible.
I don't know how you can get to that. Yeah.
I'd say minus 125, maybe, but even that, I feel Buckley throws mostly pretty wide hooks versus Fialho, who throws everything straight and right down the center line. So,
and my thing with Buckley too is it's just a lot of like just jumping in and out, like into the pocket.
yeah.
I feel like Fialho will have no issue. I feel like countering that. So
yeah, and that's the other thing. Pepe mentioned it earlier this week, but I had bet Buckley against Curtis, and I thought it was a good bet. I still kind of think it was, although I'm not really sure, because once you start to pick up on Buckley's movements, he doesn't really have a plan B. It's throw leg kick on the outside, jump in with a winging hook into the pocket, jump back out of the pocket. And once you pick up on that, he's right there to be crushed. I mean, Kevin Holland obviously picked up on it very early. So did DeChirico when he caught him with that kick. We've just seen it happen over and over again. So, yeah, I mean, Fialho has to be the side, in my opinion, at this price. Moving on, legs, I'll stick with you here. Emily Ducati, Lupita Godinez. Godinez like minus 153, Ducati plus 133. What are your thoughts?
Well, now that I think about it, because I remember when I was breaking down the KK fight, I said KK and Ducati. I meant KK Demopolis. Demo, Ducati. Yeah, my bad on that one.
Close enough.
But
they're both on this card.
Yeah, I know. It's a tough one. This is a weird one to me because, like, I feel like Ducati, again, like, on the feet, I do think she is the better striker. I think the men's could be fairly competitive, but I do think Ducati's the better striker. And I don't think it's going to be easy for Lupi to have wrestling success if she even goes to it. Obviously, she is going to go to it, but I just don't think it's going to be easy for her to hold her down consistently. So I lean more so on the Ducati side, just not a passionate take.
Yeah. I don't know if I want to bet it or not. I'm also with you there, though. My thing is, I do think the line's a bit of an overreaction to the Hill fight. Hill and Godinez obviously very different fighters. And obviously, if you lined up those two fights next to each other, Hill's fight with Godinez and Ducati, Godinez outperformed Ducati in that fight. But at the same time, if you lined up their fights versus Jessica Penne next to one another, Ducati massively outperformed her. And my thing with Ducati is I think she has to be able to pick her shots. Like, if you pressure her aggressively and are in her face and she can't reset and like selectively choose where she's going to hit, she kind of collapses. And you saw that with Hill. Hill didn't let her breathe that entire fight. She was just putting it on her from minute one. And you could see Ducati was kind of confused and didn't really have a plan B in that fight. But that's not Lupi's game. I mean, look at Lupi's last fight with Cynthia Calvillo. That was a very, very close fight. You could argue Cynthia won it. And Lupi was kind of happy on the back end of that fight to have a just jabbing contest with Cynthia. And I think if that's a game she gets into with Ducati, it poses a lot of issues for her. In particular, calf kicks at Ducati and, her counter rights could be huge. I personally think Ducati's got more finishing upside in this fight. She does. I mean, look, Ducati's the rare woman who has actually knocked out women with her hands. You don't really see that often, and she has done it, whereas we haven't really seen that from Lupi. So I do sort of think she has moment upside. The real question is the wrestling. Can Hill go in there and dominate on the ground? I'm kind of with you. Yeah, Andrew Hill cannot dominate on the ground this week.
Yeah. No. She should avoid that this week.
But I'm kind of with you. I mean, Ducati fought Kanako Murata and Alicia Zapatella. Granted, Zapatella is very small. She's an atom weight. But neither of them had a very easy time holding her on the mat. And Murata in particular has much better cardio than Lupi does. We've seen when Lupi has to attempt multiple takedowns, she can get tired. in particular, you look at the Karolina fight, and I mean, even in striking fights, she's gotten tired. We saw it against Calvillo. We saw it against Angela Hill. So, yeah, I agree with Jared here. It feels overcorrective to me, and I feel like it's a very close fight. I just don't know if I want to bet Takashi, honestly, after I bet her against Angela Hill. It is. But I do think she's the side. Moving on, Edmen Shahbazayan, Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. I'll keep this short and sweet. I honestly kind of initially early in this week thought about betting Edmen. I do think there is a real case here on the Edmen side for, look, we all know the issues with Edmen, right? He's got bad cardio, and in the past he's had some defensive wrestling issues. Ironically, he's a pretty good offensive wrestler. So, but regardless, this is his second full camp at Extreme Couture. He's 25 years old. He's a dangerous striker. Is his cardio cleaned up? We don't really know. Yeah, I mean, I thought, there is, in my opinion, significant improvement upside on the Edmen side of things. And on the other side with Fluffy, there is enough. He's fragile enough to the body and hittable enough in space that if he can't just get on top of Edmen from minute one, he's going to have some issues early in this fight. And so I was thinking about it, and I'm like, yeah, Edmen plus 200 is probably good. But then it's like, the more I think about it, just the cardio gap here is just insane. And you and I touched on it. I'll let you touch on it. But Edmen really probably has to finish Fluffy at an incredibly high pace or an incredibly high rate early in this fight to cover his price. Unless Fluffy out of nowhere soft cocks and just kind of doesn't engage because he's afraid of the power, which he's never done, he is going to break Edmen at some point down the stretch of this fight. So I get the Edmen takes. I really do. And I think there's a real argument to be made that Edmen could get better. The problem is, until we see it, it's very hard to trust. If he was plus 400, it would be a much easier, button to click here. But he's not plus 400. So I think Fluffy breaks him eventually. What do you think, Lags?
Yeah, I think the lines when they were originally out, like at minus 250 Fluffy, like I thought that was more so fine. And where the over 1.5 at now at minus 170, like I think they're all roughly accurate because I think we're kind of thinking the same thing, that if this gets extended, Fluffy probably does have his way, probably finds a finish round 2, round 3 potentially. That's kind of where I lie. I mean, for me, projecting anything past a round 1 success, like projecting round 1 success for Shahbazayan, it's just a lot of hope, just assumption, really. Like, obviously, like he could be getting better 100%, but I mean, Fluffy's the guy, like, he's a certain group of guys. He's in that group of guys where it's like, if he survives that 5 minutes, he's going to put it on you. I mean, good luck getting through it.
Well, he just that's put it the on other problem, right?
Go ahead.
He might win round 1 anyway, just on that pace.
True.
No, what were you going to say? Sorry.
I was just going to say, he literally just out-cardioed another guy in that group, Marc-Andre Barrios, a guy we love, podcast supporter. Yeah. He's got great pace, great cardio. Love it.
Yeah, I agree. I will say, in regards to the round 2, round 3, one thing that gives me pause is we have seen when Edmen gets tired, in particular in the Hermansson fight, he seemed very, very happy to lock down half guard and just lay there and lose round 3 and lose that fight. And Fluffy isn't exactly the kind of guy who's going to be posturing and throwing ground and pound. So I kind of think it could go over or go the distance at a decent clip, honestly, because I know Fluffy's got a bunch of guillotines, but that's a tough setup to hit the higher you go. And like I said, I don't think he throws a ton of ground and pound. So I honestly wouldn't be shocked that it goes the distance here.
Yeah, I mean, I think the over 1.5, like the under, pretty much it's an Edmen correlation, 100%. I mean, could Fluffy just get on top of him in the first like minute and a half, 2 minutes, maybe? But I think it's mostly Edmen correlated for the under. And then, what was I just going to say? The round 2, round 3, when we were just talking about that, they're already pricing that into it. The round 2 is like 5 to 1, and I think round 3 7 to 1.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, there's not really much of an edge there.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm with you. I really, again, I think we both get it. I really thought about Edmen, but
yeah, it's all these people, I guess, that are playing Edmen. Like, why not play like the inside the distance? I guess, is it that much better? I'd have to look at it, but like, that's where I would be looking.
You can get KO at plus 380. I know that.
Right, we're just talking about that. The inside the distance, yeah, 275.
It's not terrible.
I would
Shahbazayan,
much
what's
rather play
Shahbazayan in
that.
round 1? Plus 550. Actually, plus if you have Unibet, it's plus 750. Plus 550 though on FanDuel.
Yeah, I would much
I
rather
think
play like the
that's
round
better.
one and the
Yeah.
inside the distance. Yeah.
I think I agree. But yeah, I mean, Fluffy should really cook him here. Moving on. Main event time. Mackenzie Dern, Angela Hill, bizarro main event. But we will talk about it. Mackenzie Dern, currently minus 171. Angela Hill, plus 146. What are your thoughts, Lags?
I feel like this is similar to last week's main event where it's like it's not getting a lot of spotlight because we kind of think, oh, if it hits the ground, oh, Dern's going to sub her kind of thing, you know? Kind of like, oh, Jelton's going to roll through him. My issue with Dern has been the same issue I've always had with Dern, and we talk about it on this podcast every time Dern fights. Her wrestling sucks. It's horrible. And so on top of the fact, this actually moving to 5 rounds, I feel like people are saying, oh, it's better for Dern. She has more chances to sub her, but I think it's worse for Dern. I think her cardio is not that good at all. If I had any faith in Angela Hill, I'd be having, again, that's the thing too, with the 5-round nature. It's like, am I trusting Angela Hill for 25 minutes? Because just one slip up, if she finds herself on the mat, it's like, well, the fight's potentially over. So not trying to go ahead.
Would you call Mackenzie Dern the female Chase Hooper?
With an ass. Yeah, I would say something like that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I agree with you. I do agree with you. And but how much money have we lost trying to fade Mackenzie Dern?
That's the thing. Like, and I'm not trying to sound like the same guy every week, but we've been doing it every time with Dern and saying, oh, she's bad wrestler, and then she goes and fights Marina and Yan Xiaonan, girls who are horrible defensive grapplers, and still finds a way to lose that fight.
Yeah, but then she beats Tisha Torres in a fight where she barely gets her down.
Yep,
it was
bizarre.
Yeah,
I'm just done losing money on Dern fights. I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I think it's a tough fight to break down. I mean, because as you said, there's not a whole lot to talk about technically. We all know if they're striking, Angela Hill is better. If they're grappling, Dern is going to sub her, and Dern is bad at takedowns. We all know this. The question is just like, what kind of clip does Dern get this to the mat at? And I'm not really sure. You know, Dern brings this like retard energy in your face that I feel like could really wear on Hill. Even if she's not getting her down early, I feel like, although Dern gasses too, you're not wrong about that. But I feel like the way Dern forces the fight inevitably leads to this hitting the mat at some point. And as far as I'm concerned, for Hill, the floor is lava. You know, we've seen it with just about anybody other than Amanda Ribas and Verna with Dern, that when the fight's gone there, things have gone horribly south. And I have no reason to think that won't happen with Hill. And the thing is with Dern, I feel like Dern has, I agree with Evan that she should jump guard. I feel like Dern has a lot more room for error when gassed out, because Angie's probably not going to knock her out on the feet. And when they're gassed out, Dern can like still make things happen in the scrambling and on the mat. Whereas, you know, you see when Angie gets tired, man, her shots come very heavy, very labored. We've seen it a handful of times. Yeah. So, I mean, I think the line's right. It kills me to say it, but I do think at some point this probably finds its way to the mat. There's just, again, it's a classic fight where there's maybe a 30 to 35% chance that Dern finishes the fight, and maybe a 5 to 10% chance Hill does. With that dynamic, like, Hill has to win a decision at an enormous clip for the line to be wrong. And I just don't. I mean, look at the on fight. You just talked about it, but that was a majority decision after Dern 10-8'd her in round 5. You know, that's what happens with these Dern fights, where Dern could be really shit throughout this fight, but have 2 rounds on the ground where she just absolutely thrashes Hill. So yeah, I mean, I'm not going to do it. Yeah.
The only thing I would add here is if you do like the Dern side, you got to just be playing sub. Like the people who are like, oh, it's going to hit the ground at some point. Like you're getting plus 180 on the sub, plus 150. And if you wanted the Gen Flyer out there, FanDuel, Dern KO is 20 to 1.
I like that a bit more just because Dern does. I mean, she does throw hard. I mean, she swings in air most of the time, but she is chucking heat. But yeah, I mean, even that's not super appealing to me. Like, I feel like that's right. Plus 180-ish for Dern sub, maybe a little better. I don't know. I'm out of the Mackenzie Dern business.
Yeah.
And I might be out of the Chase Super business after this week. We'll see.
True. Yeah, for me, like with the 180 number, like I touched on it a little bit with the cardio. She's only had one finish outside of round one. Like she really does look like dreadful, honestly, past the first round. She might have, like you said, dominant rounds in the 5th round, but it's like she pushes through well, but the cardio, I don't think it's great.
No, it's not. The problem is Angie's cardio is not great.
True. True.
So
one of those, man, like, why do we have to make this a main event, man? Like,
I know.
What are we doing out here?
What are we doing with the last? I mean, we had like last week. Why is Jairzinho, Rosenstruck, and Jonathan Almeida, that we all know isn't going more than 7 minutes? Why is that being a main event? Like, there are so many good flyweight and bantamweight fights that could be fun main events, and we're getting stuck with Mackenzie Dern and a bunch of fat guys who can't fight for more past 7 minutes. Like what are we doing?
They did Spivak and Lewis. Same thing.
Yeah. Like, be better, Dana White. That's really all. I will always and forever thank him for giving us MMA during COVID when nothing else in the world was happening, and when we started this podcast. But
we need better main events out here.
We need better fucking main events. That is what we need. You have any plans for it?
No, I do not. I do not have any plans.
Okay, what's the weed of the week?
The weed of the week. Ooh. Trying to think which one I have in now. Ooh, it is Funky Pine. Funky Pine from Cresco.
Okay. All right.
Delicious.
I'm rolling with the little Pineapple Express from Rise down on Route 20.
Oh, those are good.
They are good. They are good. We'll be chilling with that on Saturday. Since breakfast cocktail week was a disaster, we're moving over to marijuana this Saturday. Going to try to change the chi up a bit.
You're going to have
anyway,
to
guys.
Main event, you know?
Oh, God. I'm just going to use that to put me to sleep, the main event. Don't even need it. Yeah.
True.
Anyway, guys, thanks for coming out this week. We really appreciate it. Again, for the algorithm, for us, for the boys, for everybody, for people who are actual analysts and not giving out narrative every week, drop a like and subscribe. I will put timestamps up tonight. I promise it. Really appreciate all of you. As always, you can find me on Twitter, MMA Fox. You can find Lags at Danny_Lags. If you ever want to shout, hit us up. Yeah, good luck this weekend on your bets, except unless you're fading us. But I hope everybody wins money. Peace.